It came on a Tuesday, tucked into a cream-colored envelope, the kind with that fake wax seal that peels off in one soft motion. My name was written in cursive, Ms. Claire Halberg, like the person addressing it didn't really know me but wanted to pretend they did. I held it in my hands for a long time before I opened it. The sunlight was falling through the blinds just right, cutting my living room into clean gold and shadow. I could still smell my mother's perfume on the paper. I don't know if it was real or just something memory does. It was Lauren's wedding. Of course it was. And of course she sent it without a note. Just the details printed on textured stock ceremony in Tennessee at the barn we used to drive by as kids, the one with the weather-beaten silo and the door that always hung open like a question. I hadn't seen Lauren in 5 years. We didn't have a fight exactly. We just stopped being in the same room without it hurting. The kind of silence that doesn't come from lack of things to say. It comes from knowing if you say the truth, it'll ruin everything. My mother always said Lauren was the soft one, the delicate one. Which made me what? The one who didn't break when dropped. That's a lie. I break. I just do it differently. I placed the invitation on my kitchen table and set my grandfather's old dove-shaped candle holder on top of it. I haven't lit that candle in years. It's waxed down to a stub, now the wick crooked. I kept it because it was the last thing left from him after the house was sold. I didn't RSVP right away. I didn't even sit down. I stood there, arms crossed, the quiet humming in my ears like something alive. I looked out the window. Colorado snow still crusted the curb. The branches outside were stiff and bare. I've been stationed here going on 9 years. I don't mind the cold. It makes sense. It doesn't ask anything of me. I thought about Lauren's face, how she used to hold her breath before blowing out birthday candles like even that was a performance. I wondered what her dress would look like. Probably silk, probably sleeveless, probably like something out of a bridal magazine she'd tearfully dog-eared in high school. I hadn't worn a dress in years. I walked back to my bedroom and pulled out the old suitcase I keep beneath the bed, the one I used to take on deployment. I ran my hand across the zipper and felt the dust lift. My palm left a print. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the scar on my left hand. A thin white line where the bone had almost come through after I'd punched a concrete wall in Mosul. Anger doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it's just impact. I opened the suitcase, but I didn't pack it yet. I needed to think. Or maybe I just needed to delay deciding. A week later, I booked the flight. I still didn't RSVP. I don't know if I went because I wanted to see Lauren or because I wanted to see what would happen when she saw me. The rehearsal dinner was held at a vineyard with too many white chairs and too few honest conversations. I arrived early, or maybe everyone else was just late. The woman at the check-in table looked at me the way some people look at a thundercloud on a clear day, confused, a little afraid, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I wore a dark charcoal suit, tailored clean lines, no frills. My tie was a muted navy, the same one I wore to General Teller's funeral last year. I stood out against the soft pinks and baby blues like a shadow in a nursery. The moment I stepped onto the gravel path, I heard my name. Claire. My mother's sharp perfume and brittle pearls hugged me with arms that didn't bend. Her lips touched my cheek like they were fulfilling a quota. "You look professional," she said like it was a compromise between compliment and concern. I didn't answer, just nodded. Lauren was near the fountain, surrounded by a swirl of chiffon and curated laughter. When she turned and saw me, her smile was the kind you practice in the mirror before a job interview. It didn't reach her eyes. Then it dropped almost imperceptibly. "Claire," she said, stepping toward me. "You made it. You invited me? I wasn't sure you'd come." I let the silence settle like ash between us. Her fiancé, Eric, appeared at her side like a dog on cue. He was tall, tan, had the kind of face you forget 5 minutes after meeting. He extended his hand. His grip was damp. "So this is the famous sister," he said, laughing. "Lauren told me all about you. Army, right, or Navy Army?" I said. He laughed again, even though it wasn't funny. Lauren clutched his arm tighter. "Let's get you a seat," she said, already walking away. My place card at the dinner table said Claire Hallberg. No E. No second glance. I slid it aside and sat near the edge, partly obscured by a marble pillar, and a floral arrangement so aggressively pink it looked like it had been frosted. The waiter poured me half a glass of wine and never came back. From where I sat, I could see Lauren only in glimpses, her dress brushing against chairs, her laugh rising too high at things no one else found funny. Eric leaned close to every woman he spoke to. I watched his hand brush the back of a bridesmaid's shoulder. Twice. My mother took center stage for a toast, her voice quivering with importance. "Lauren, my precious girl," she said, "you've always had such grace, such beauty. Watching you grow into the woman you are today," her eyes glanced toward me, "has been a joy." When she sat down, someone whispered something about me just loud enough for me to hear. "She's the one who got that medal right. The Purple Cross or something." "No, it's called the Purple Heart," someone else said. "It's for getting wounded." Oh, that was it. Just like the fact of it was smaller than the seating chart. The gift bag I brought, small, square, wrapped in brown paper, and string sat beneath my chair. I'd spent 2 days deciding whether to bring it. 2 days weighing the weight of the thing inside it. Now, looking around, I felt foolish for thinking it would matter. I noticed a crack in the marble floor, just beneath my heel. The kind of fracture that looks cosmetic until you realize it runs deeper. Like a scar that doesn't rise to the surface, but makes everything around it fragile. No one asked me what I'd been doing. No one asked where I'd come from. It was like I'd stepped through a door into a house that remembered me only by outline, and even that had faded. Eric gave a toast next, called Lauren his dream girl, and said she brought light to every room she entered. Everyone laughed when he said she could be a bit bossy. But that's what makes her sexy, right? He looked around for applause. "Got some." I stared into my glass. The wine had gone warm. There was a lipstick mark on the rim, but it wasn't mine. The night dragged like a dress caught on thorns. I kept my back straight, didn't fidget, didn't touch my phone. People passed me by without stopping. I think someone mistook me for staff at one point, but didn't bother asking. After dessert, Lauren walked past my table, her arm looped around Eric's. She didn't look at me, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, not quite contempt. Something in between. She was wearing a gold bracelet I hadn't seen before. Our mothers, maybe. Or new. Hard to tell. Everything about her shimmered like stage lighting, too bright to be real. I left before the sparklers. No one stopped me. Back in the rental car, I sat in the dark for a while. The suit felt too tight around my collar. I took off the jacket, folded it carefully, and placed it on the passenger seat. The gift bag sat beside it. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat there, watching the candle of the parking lot lamp flicker in the rearview mirror. Watching the light go on. Then off. Then on again. The morning of the wedding, the sun came in pale and watery, like it didn't want to commit. I stood in front of the hotel mirror, adjusting my collar for the 4th time. There was a crease at the shoulder that wouldn't flatten no matter how many times I ran my hand over it. My hands looked tired. I didn't used to notice that. The gift sat in the passenger seat again as I drove to the venue. The barn had been repainted white now with new light fixtures and fake ivy climbing up the entrance. It looked like something that wanted to forget what it used to be. I waited until just before the ceremony to approach the bridal suite. The hallway smelled like peonies and hairspray. A bridesmaid I didn't recognize opened the door. She blinked at me. "She's getting her lashes done," she said. "I won't stay long," I said, stepping past her. Lauren was sitting in front of a mirror with one eye closed, a makeup artist holding a tiny brush like a scalpel. Her hair was pinned in looping curls, small white pearls scattered like frost. "Hey," I said. She opened her other eye, saw me in the mirror. "Oh," she said. "Hey." I stepped forward and held out the box. Small, wooden, aged. I hadn't wrapped it in anything elaborate, just a simple knot of twine, tight and clean. "This is for you," I said. "From Grandpa. From me." She took it like it was heavier than it looked. Turned it in her palms, looked at the twine, then pulled it loose. The box opened with a soft click. Inside, nestled in velvet, was the silver compass. It was scratched in places, dulled in others, but still dignified, still precise. She tilted her head. "Oh," she said again. The makeup artist paused. One of the bridesmaids leaned in. "It's vintage," Lauren said, and then laughed. "I guess it's symbolic." A ripple of giggles moved through the room. One of them said something about army vibes and old school cool, but it was the kind of comment people make when they don't know what else to say. Lauren didn't thank me. She just closed the lid and placed the box next to a bottle of setting spray, like it was another accessory to be managed. Something inside me flinched, but I didn't let it move to my face. "Okay," I said, "that's all." I turned to leave. Behind me, someone whispered, "Was that her sister?" Someone else answered, "Yeah, the one with the medals." I stepped into the hallway and let the door click shut behind me. The air outside the suite was cooler. I stood there for a second, just breathing. The hallway light above me buzzed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of cloth, a cleaning cloth I'd brought for the compass. I hadn't used it. I put it back. I walked out of the main building and into the side garden, the one behind the barn, where the servers were sneaking cigarettes and checking their phones. One of them looked up. "You okay?" I nodded. "You family?" he asked. "Sister," I said. He whistled low. "Damn, you don't look like her." I didn't respond, just stared out at the trees beyond the property line. My phone buzzed. A message from the base. Nothing urgent, just protocol updates. I stared at the screen, then turned it face down on the bench beside me. I thought about Grandpa again, about how he used to keep the compass in his front pocket wrapped in a handkerchief. He'd let me hold it sometimes, but only if I stood still. He used to say pointing isn't the same as guiding. You still gotta choose to follow. I had chosen to give it to her. I hadn't expected applause. But I hadn't expected laughter either. Back inside, the ceremony was beginning. I slipped into my seat near the back behind a pillar again, next to a woman who spent the whole time adjusting her shawl. The music started. Lauren walked down the aisle, glowing and perfect eyes wide like she'd practiced looking that happy. I kept my hands folded in my lap. She passed me and didn't look. The compass was gone. There was a pillar between me and the couple. A wide one painted white, flecked with little scratches where the paint had started to chip. It blocked about a third of the altar from view. I didn't ask to move. I didn't really want to see the whole thing. My seat was at table 9 near the kitchen doors. The music from the reception had already started by the time I got there. A violinist and a speaker hidden behind floral arrangements. They were playing a slowed-down version of a pop song I used to hate. Somehow in this context, it sounded almost reverent. My name card was there again, Claire still missing the E. I turned it face down. Across the table, an older couple was discussing their lake house renovations. Next to me, a guy in a lavender bow tie scrolled through his phone under the tablecloth. No one introduced themselves. No one asked who I was. I could see Lauren making her way around the other tables, glowing like a soft filtered photograph, her smile delicate and blinding. She looked thinner than last time. Not in a healthy way, more like something that had been carved down. Eric walked 2 steps behind her, shaking hands, laughing loudly. At one point, he picked up a toddler from someone's lap and pretended to dance with her. It got a round of applause. Lauren laughed, but her mouth looked tight. I reached for the wine glass, took a sip. Too sweet. I set it down and pushed it away with one finger. The centerpiece on our table was a glass jar stuffed with fake baby's breath and fairy lights. It blinked every few seconds like it couldn't decide whether to stay lit. When Lauren finally reached our side of the room, her smile slipped a little, just around the corners. She leaned down and touched the shoulder of the woman next to me, an old college friend maybe. Then Eric leaned in toward me, glass in hand. "You're Claire, right?" he asked. I looked at him, said nothing. He didn't seem to mind the silence. Just looked me over like I was something to be appraised. "Lauren said you were military," he said, grinning. "No wonder you've got the whole posture thing going on." He made a vague gesture near his own spine. Then he raised his eyebrows and added "ma'am." There was a pause. It wasn't long, but it cut deep. He smirked like it was a joke, like calling a woman ma'am at a wedding was hilarious. I didn't flinch, didn't smile. Just looked him straight in the eye and said, "You're not in my chain of command." He laughed awkwardly. "Right. Yeah. Of course." Lauren was already moving on. She hadn't even looked at me directly. I watched her disappear into a sea of silk and sequins, her veil dragging like a whisper behind her. The music shifted. The DJ announced the first dance. A soft spotlight fell onto the cleared space in front of the cake table. They danced like they were being watched. Hands placed too carefully. Eyes meeting on cue. I wondered what it felt like to choreograph affection that well. My glass was empty. I didn't refill it. The kitchen doors swung open behind me. The scent of roasted chicken and rosemary wafted in, warm and familiar. A server passed by, nearly bumping my chair. He didn't apologize. I thought about the compass. Wondered if Lauren had left it in the bridal suite, or maybe tossed it in a drawer somewhere. I didn't want it back. That wasn't the point. There's something hollow about giving something with history to someone who doesn't care what it remembers. The couple next to me stood up for pictures. The man offered his arm to his wife like they were rehearsing for something bigger than this. I sat alone at the table watching the dance. Eric dipped her. Her hair brushed the floor. Everyone clapped. For a second, I thought Lauren's eyes landed on me, but maybe she was just looking past. I turned away. There was a single candle on our table. It flickered sharply and then dimmed. I leaned in closer. The wick had bent sideways, buried in wax. I pressed my thumb against the side of the jar, feeling the faint heat. It was like being near something that was trying hard not to go out. I left the table sometime during the cake cutting. No one noticed. The music was louder now, the kind of thumping rhythm that fills your chest before your ears. I walked past the coat room, past the kids huddled around the dessert table with sticky fingers and stained mouths, and climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. There was a guest bathroom up there. I remembered it from when the barn was still just a barn. No chandelier, no climate control, just splinters and hay. The renovations kept the shell, but not the soul. The doorknob stuck a little. I stepped inside and clicked the lock, but the bolt didn't catch. I tested it twice, jiggled it. Nothing. Still, I shut the door and leaned against it anyway. The mirror over the sink was foggy at the edges, like it had never quite cleared from decades of humidity. I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the posture. Something about my shoulders, they were too high, like I was bracing for impact. I rolled them back and exhaled. That didn't help either. The bathroom smelled like eucalyptus and bleach. A folded towel sat on the sink next to a scented candle that had burned down low. I picked it up, tilted the jar. Sea fog, the label read. Funny. A smell that pretends to be a feeling. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet, unclipped the side pocket of my blazer, and pulled out a tissue-wrapped square. The compass. I hadn't meant to take it back, not exactly. After Lauren laughed at it, I'd left it behind. But then I saw it later, tossed in the trash can under a bundle of used napkins and a crushed makeup wipe. I didn't say anything to anyone, just reached in, picked it up, cleaned it off with the sleeve of my jacket, and slid it into my pocket like it had never left me. Now I set it in my lap. The silver was dulled. It still had that tiny chip on the side from when Grandpa dropped it in the creek during one of our trips. I used to think it gave it character. Now I just thought it looked tired. I turned the lid open. The needle swung for a second, then settled. West. Always west. I remembered the sound his voice used to make when he said that word. Not like a direction, like a promise. I stared at the arrow for a long time. My thumb traced the rim until it hurt. The door creaked behind me. I looked up. A bridesmaid had pushed it open without knocking. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Oh," she said. I didn't move. "Sorry, I didn't know someone was in here," she stammered. "The lock's broken." "I know," I said. She hesitated in the doorway, then gave me a tight smile and pulled the door shut again. I listened to her heels click away down the hall. Then I listened to nothing. Just silence. The kind that gets in your chest and expands slowly like cold air. I looked down at the compass again. I thought about the time Grandpa gave it to me, not officially, just one of those quiet exchanges. We were at a rest stop, sitting on the tailgate of his truck. He placed it in my hand, without a word. I didn't even ask why. Some part of me had thought, maybe foolishly, that Lauren would understand what it meant. Not just the object, the weight of it. The way it had carried his hand through decades of lost roads and foreign soil. The way he had believed in it more than in most people. But she didn't see that. She saw metal. She saw a weird, old, broken thing. And I realized something in that moment, sitting on the toilet in a fancy barn bathroom with a broken lock and a candle that smelled like marketing. She never would see it. Not the way I did. Not the way he did. She didn't throw it out because she hated me. She threw it out because it didn't mean anything, and that cut deeper than hate. I stood up, slipped the compass back into my pocket, and ran cold water over my hands. I stared at the sink as the water pooled, as the faucet whined. My palms were red when I turned it off. There was a small scar on the inside of my right wrist. I'd gotten it during a training exercise years ago, too close to a flash grenade metal slicing skin. It looked like a crescent moon now, almost poetic if you squinted. I stared at it a little too long. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened and I swallowed something I couldn't name. Back downstairs, the music was still going. The DJ was announcing the bouquet toss. I paused on the landing and looked out over the crowd. All that pastel fabric. All those clean smiles. All that light that didn't reach me. I reached into my pocket, felt the cool shape of the compass, and curled my fingers around it. Then I walked outside. There's a hill behind the barn, just past the gravel lot where the caterers parked their trucks. Most of the guests never see it, It's unlit, uneven, and littered with old pine needles. But I remembered it. Lauren and I used to race up that hill when we were kids. Summers so humid our shirts clung to us like damp towels. At the top, there was a rusted swing set that belonged to no one. It leaned slightly to the left, one leg sunk deep into the earth like it was trying to bury itself. That's where I went. My heels weren't meant for dirt, but I walked slowly, letting the ground take them. I wanted the air, wanted the silence. The music behind me faded into a dull thump, like a heart behind a wall. I stopped when I reached the swing set. It hadn't changed. One of the swings was still whole. The other was frayed and hanging crooked chains twisted like they'd tried to braid themselves. I sat on the low one and didn't move. Just let the air settle around me. There was a bite in the breeze early spring, pretending to be winter. My blazer wasn't warm enough, but I didn't zip it. I let the cold in. Sometimes discomfort is the only thing that reminds you you're still real. From this spot, I could see the edge of the property, the tree line that marked the end of the vineyard, and the start of actual woods. Real earth. Wild and unplanned. I took the compass out of my pocket. Its lid clicked open the same way it always had. The needle spun once, then pointed west like it was tired of repeating itself. I thought of Grandpa again. The way he'd whisper, "It'll always point you home even when people don't." He said it like a joke, but his eyes didn't match the tone. I stared at the trees, tried to imagine what home meant now. It used to mean the hallway with the loose floorboard, the drawer where we hid Halloween candy from Mom, the porch light Lauren always forgot to turn off. But those places were gone. Sold, painted over, made pristine for some family who'd never know our version of it. Lauren didn't live there anymore. Neither did Mom. And I hadn't stepped foot inside since the day we buried Grandpa. I remembered standing by the doorway, suitcase in hand, choosing not to walk in. Not out of anger, just knowing if I crossed that threshold, I'd become someone I didn't want to be. I swung a little, not enough to move, just enough to creak. My hands were cold, but I didn't put the compass away. I heard footsteps, eventually soft ones, deliberate. A pair of white flats appeared at the edge of my vision. I didn't look up. It was Lauren. She stood there in her gown veil, pinned back the hem-brushing mud and pine needles. I heard her breathing, but she didn't speak. For a long time, it was just her and me and the creaking of the chain. Then she said, "Mom's looking for you." I still didn't look at her. "I needed air," I said. She shifted her weight. "I didn't know you'd come. I didn't know if I would." She sat on the grass beside me, careful to keep the dress off the dirt. That made me glance at her. Just once. Her makeup was slightly smudged at the corner of one eye. The kind of thing no one would mention to the bride. She looked straight ahead. "You hate him, don't you?" "I don't know him," I said. She laughed, short and brittle. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." I didn't respond. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were painted the same shade of blush as her bouquet. I remembered when she used to bite them bloody. "You gave me Grandpa's compass," she said. "Why I thought about it?" I really thought. Then I said, "Because I wanted to believe you'd know what to do with it." She flinched. It was small, but I saw it. "I didn't mean to laugh," she said. "I know. It just caught me off guard." Everyone was watching. I panicked. I turned toward her just a little. "You always do that. Perform, then apologize." Her face twisted. "You think I'm fake?" "No, I think you're scared." She didn't deny it. The silence stretched again. The trees swayed. Something in the branches made a soft cracking sound. Lauren wiped her eye with the back of her hand. I feel like I'm in a play I didn't write. I looked down at the compass. This thing, I said, lifting it a little. It's not magic. It doesn't fix anything. It just tells you where you are, not where you should go. She nodded like she understood, but I'm not sure she did. I kept it, she said suddenly. After I laughed, I felt stupid, so I threw it in the trash. Then I took it out again. I don't know why. I do, I said, because somewhere under the performance, you remember. We sat there for a while longer, long enough for the wind to change directions, long enough for the music to fade back into our ears. Lauren stood first. You should come back inside, she said. Maybe, I said. She hesitated, then walked away, careful not to look back. I stayed until the stars started to show. I was still sitting at the swing set when I heard the crunch of dress shoes behind me, too heavy to be one of the bridesmaids, too casual to be my mother. Eric. He didn't announce himself. Just stood there for a second, probably waiting for me to acknowledge him. I didn't. Eventually, he walked around and sat on the swing next to mine, the one with the crooked chain. It groaned under his weight. Lauren said you might be out here, he said. I didn't answer. She gets overwhelmed, he added, like it was a defense. All this attention, it's a lot. You know how she is. I didn't need to answer that either. He pulled a cigarette from his coat pocket and lit it with practiced ease. One of those slim menthols that doesn't smell like real smoke, more like chemicals and intention. You want one? He asked, offering me the pack. No, didn't think so. He took a drag and stared out at the trees. You're not what I expected, he said after a moment. Lauren always talked about you like some kind of ghost, a big shadow hanging over everything. I raised an eyebrow. And yet, here I am, flesh and blood. He smiled like he thought I was kidding. I looked you up, he said, after the rehearsal dinner. Lauren never told me what you did. Not really. I saw your commendations. Your rank. That photo of you in uniform, the one from the awards ceremony, damn. I waited. You don't look like that now, he added. You look, smaller. Still, I said nothing. I think she's scared of you, he said, a little too pleased with the thought. Not in a bad way, just intimidated. You're this whole life she doesn't understand. You married her, I said finally. Not me. He exhaled slowly. The smoke curled toward the trees. She told me once that when you were kids, you used to hold your breath until you passed out, just to win arguments. That was her, I said. He laughed. Really? She said it was you. That's the thing about Lauren, I said. She collects stories. Sometimes she forgets who they belong to first. He shifted in the swing. You think I'm wrong for her, don't you? I think you like to be liked, I said. That's not the same as love. He went quiet. For the first time, he looked like he didn't have a comeback. Then softly he asked, Do you love her? I looked down at the compass in my hand. Still pointing west, still doing its job. Yes, I said. That's the problem. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he just wanted to seem like he did. We sat there for a long time, not speaking. The wind moved through the branches in short, nervous bursts. Eventually he stood, brushed his pants off like he'd been somewhere dirty. Well, he said, I guess we'll both keep pretending. Good luck, I said. He turned to go. Paused halfway. You're intense, you know that? Not in a bad way. Just, it's a lot. I looked at him. You called me ma'am like it was a joke, and you're telling me I'm a lot? He blinked, then grinned. Fair enough. He disappeared down the hill, back toward the lights and the music, and whatever performance was still happening inside that barn. I stayed a while longer. The cold settled into my bones, but I didn't move. When I finally stood, my legs had gone stiff. The swing squeaked behind me, slowly rocking back and forth, even after I let go. I followed the fence line instead of the path. The grass was uneven, dotted with patches of frost that hadn't melted from the morning. I liked the way it felt under my shoes. Real, untamed. At the far end of the vineyard, just beyond the last row of grapevines, there was a cluster of trees that hadn't been trimmed or curated. I stepped between them like crossing into another world. Here, there were no string lights, no toasts, no false laughter. Just bark and leaf and dark. I pressed the compass into my palm and let it guide me a little further into the quiet. And for the first time that day, I breathed all the way in. It was just past midnight when the phone rang. The kind of ring that comes too late to be good news, but too familiar to ignore. I was lying on the hotel bed in my undershirt and slacks, the jacket folded across the chair, the compass still in the inside pocket where it had stayed all evening. The lights were off. I'd meant to shower, but never made it that far. I'd just been staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fridge and the faint click of the ice machine down the hall. When I saw Lauren's name on the screen, I didn't answer at first. Let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. There was a pause, then static, then her voice barely above a whisper. "Claire, I didn't say anything. I didn't think you'd pick up," she said and laughed. It was that shaky kind of laugh you can only get away with when you're half drunk and mostly hurting. "Are you okay?" I asked. She sniffled. "I don't know." I sat up slowly. "Where are you upstairs?" "In the bridal suite. Alone." Another long pause. I could hear her breathing the shallow way someone does when they're trying to keep it together, but failing. "I think I made a mistake," she said. "Which part?" "All of it," she said. Then softer. "He didn't come back to the room." I waited. She went on. "He said he needed space, that I was too tense, that I overthought everything." Did he say where he was going? No. I could picture it too clearly. Eric probably in a truck with one of the groomsmen laughing about something stupid, while Lauren sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed in a room filled with discarded bobby pins and the smell of her own perfume, wondering where her new life had gone. "I'm tired," she said. "I'm so tired of always trying to be the person everyone expects me to be." I pressed the heel of my hand to my temple. "Then stop. It's not that easy." "It's exactly that easy," I said. "Hard comes after." She didn't answer. I could hear her crying now. Soft, barely there sobs that sounded like they'd been hiding all day. "You always seemed so certain," she said. "I'm not, but you act like you are." "That's not certainty," I said. "It's survival." She was quiet for a long time. I listened to the silence on her end, the kind that stretched like thin ice. Then she said, "Why do you hate me?" I closed my eyes. "I don't hate you, Lauren." "Then why do you always look at me like you're disappointed I'm not disappointed in you?" I said. "I'm disappointed in how much of yourself you've given away." "To who? To everyone." She broke again, then her voice cracking like a hairline fracture finally splitting open. "I don't know who I am anymore." I let that sit. I didn't try to fix it, didn't offer her cliches or bandages, just let her say it out loud. When the crying slowed, she said, "Do you remember the summer we buried that bird I did? In the front yard, under the hydrangea bush? We used a shoebox," she said, voice trembling. "You wrapped it in your old scarf. You said everything deserves to be carried with dignity even if no one notices." I remembered the scarf. Wool, dark gray torn at one end. I'd kept it for years. I thought about that today, she whispered, when I saw the compass. I just didn't know how to say thank you in front of them. You didn't have to say anything. But I laughed. You panicked, I said. I always panic when you're near. That hurt more than I expected, because I asked. Because you make me feel like I'm standing next to a mirror that doesn't lie. I exhaled slowly, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. I don't want you to hate me, she said again. Even if I deserve it. You don't, I said. But you do need to stop waiting for people to tell you who you are. She didn't reply. I heard the sound of her sitting down. Maybe on the floor, maybe on the edge of the bed. You know what I regret the most? She asked. What? That we stopped being sisters a long time ago, and neither of us said it out loud. The room felt colder suddenly. I wanted to, I said. I just didn't know if you'd hear it. Another silence. This one softer. Will you stay until morning? She asked. No, I said. She didn't act surprised. Just said, okay, I'll be gone before brunch. Can I call you? She asked. You just did. I hung up before she could reply. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say that would have meant more than the silence between us. I turned the lamp on only halfway. Light fell across the room like a half-open door. I opened my suitcase, reached beneath the folded slacks, and pulled out the compass. The lid clicked open with the same old sound. The needle spun once. Settled. Still west. Always west. I didn't move. Didn't lie down. Just sat on the edge of the bed, holding the weight of something that kept pointing away from everything I used to call home. I was on the road by 6:00 a.m. The parking lot was still damp with dew, and the barn sat silent, its shutters closed, like it had gone back to sleep after pretending to be something else for a day. The last string of fairy lights was still blinking, faintly forgotten, or maybe left on out of habit. I didn't say goodbye, not to Lauren. Not to our mother. Not to the cousins who hadn't recognized me. I didn't leave a note, just slipped the key card onto the nightstand, zipped the suitcase closed, and walked out into the cold. I'd packed light, same as always. One suit, one civilian set. Toothbrush, razor, compass, the essentials. The drive west was quiet. No radio. Just the sound of tires humming over wet asphalt, and the occasional rustle of wind against the side mirror. The sky was still bruised with early light, the horizon like an unopened letter. The compass sat in the passenger seat, angled slightly in its leather pouch, vibrating faintly with each crack in the road. I remembered something Grandpa used to say, always half serious. You don't have to be wanted to leave. You just have to be ready. The sun started to rise somewhere outside St. Louis. The light came slowly diffused and forgiving, stretching itself over the fields like a second skin. I pulled over at a gas station with a flickering open sign and a faded Pepsi machine from the 90s. Inside, the clerk didn't look up when I walked in. I got coffee black and a protein bar I didn't finish. When I stepped back outside, the chill had already started to lift. A kid was sitting on the curb near the air pump, sketching in a notebook. He looked up as I passed and said, "Are you a cop?" I paused. "No, military," he asked, eyes scanning the structure of my walk, my shoulders, my haircut. He wasn't guessing. He was recognizing. "Used to be," I said. "Cool," he muttered, then went back to his sketching. I took a seat on the bench near the entrance. The sun warmed the wood through my coat. For a second, I just watched the flag near the station sign ripple in the breeze, faded, a little torn, but still flying. I pulled the compass out, opened it. The needle swung. West. It didn't care where I'd come from, only where I hadn't yet gone. Funny how something so small could insist so stubbornly. I thought about Lauren, about the night before, about her voice cracking through the static, the way she said, "You make me feel like I'm standing next to a mirror that doesn't lie." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel wounded. I felt like someone who had put down a heavy thing after carrying it too long, not because it stopped being heavy, but because I finally realized I didn't have to carry it alone. There was still so much unresolved between us. The kind of unresolved that wouldn't get cleaned up in a single call. Maybe not in a year. Maybe never. But she'd said the thing out loud. I don't know who I am anymore. That counted for something. I crumpled the protein bar wrapper in my fist and tossed it into the trash can. Missed. Picked it up. Tried again. Back in the car, I started the engine and rolled down the window. The morning smelled like gasoline and thawing dirt. There was a highway sign ahead. I didn't check where it led. The compass pointed west, and for once that felt like enough. Not a destination, a direction. I drove for hours without speaking. Just me, the road, and that soft rumble beneath my seat that reminded me I was moving away from something that once claimed me. I passed a diner around lunchtime, thought about stopping, decided against it. Later, somewhere in Missouri, I pulled over to a rest stop by a cornfield. Got outstretched. Walked to the edge of the grass. The wind was steady here. No more of the sharp side-cutting gusts from the mountain states. Just a long, even push. I thought of Lauren in that swing set moment, how she hadn't looked back when she walked away. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she didn't dare. There was an ache in my throat. Not sadness. Not quite. Just a reminder of something unfinished. I sat on the hood of the car, compass in hand, and let the wind pull the last of the Tennessee air out of my lungs. Then I opened the compass again. It was still pointing west. Still insisting there was something left ahead. It was somewhere in Kansas when the clouds started thinning and the sky stretched wide like a field that had forgotten how to end. I'd been driving for hours, chewing on silence, like it owed me something. Around 2 in the afternoon, I pulled off the highway toward a small town called Mercer Hollow. One of those places with only 2 stoplights and a diner that looked older than statehood. The sign over the door said, the hollow cup letters, half lit and fluttering in the wind. The bell above the entrance jingled when I pushed it open. Inside it smelled like burned coffee and butter, the kind of warmth you can't fake. There were 6 booths, 2 occupied. A man in overalls sat near the window with a bowl of chili and a crossword. At the counter sat a woman with thick curls pulled back in a tie-dye scarf, stirring sugar into her tea like she was waiting for something that would never come. I chose the corner booth. Worn leather cracked vinyl perfect. The waitress' early 50s lipstick, too red for the hour, brought me black coffee without asking. That was the first good sign. I thanked her. She just nodded and walked off her sneakers, squeaking every other step. I didn't pull out my phone. Didn't check messages. I didn't want to see if Lauren had tried to contact me again. I didn't want to know if she hadn't. Instead, I took out the compass and set it on the table next to the sugar dispenser. Its lid stayed open. The needle didn't move much anymore. It had settled into a rhythm, like it trusted me to follow through. "Nice piece," a voice said. I looked up. The woman from the counter had moved to my booth, slid into the opposite seat without asking. She wasn't old 40 maybe, but her eyes looked like they'd seen things through a longer tunnel than most. "Used to carry one like that," she said, before I started trusting my gut instead. I raised an eyebrow. "And how's that worked out?" She smiled. "Depends on the day." We sat like that for a moment, 2 strangers orbiting something too quiet to name. "I'm Josie," she offered. Claire, you passing through something like that? She nodded. That one on the right, she said, pointing to the compass. Still works most days. Funny, she said. I always thought they were more about direction than location. But my brother said they were just reminders, tiny machines telling you where not to stay. I like that. I sipped the coffee. It was bitter, but real. She didn't pry, didn't ask what I was running from or headed toward. She just looked at me like someone who understood that sometimes sitting across from someone else without pretending is the best kind of company. Her hand, when it reached for her mug, had a faint scar across the knuckles, like she'd punched a window once and didn't regret it. Do you always sit with strangers, I asked? Only when they look like they're holding something heavier than their suitcase. I glanced at the compass. Not heavy, I said. Just old. She tilted her head. Same thing some would say. I didn't smile, but I didn't disagree either. We talked for 20 minutes, nothing deep. Books neither of us had read. The shape of Kansas weather. Why some people still believe maps can fix what time erases. When her phone buzzed, she stood. You take care, Claire? She said. Yeah, I said. Then without warning, she reached across the table and touched the back of my hand just for a second. It was gentle, human, without demand. It startled me more than I expected. And then she was gone, leaving the booth warmer than before. I sat for a while longer, watching the light shift on the compass lid. The coffee cooled. A truck passed outside, rattling the windows. The man by the window flipped to the next page of his crossword. Eventually, I stood, left cash on the table, tucked the compass back into my jacket. In the bathroom mirror, I caught my own reflection and paused. Not the uniformed officer from the newspaper article. Not the kid who used to sneak out after curfew. Not the sister at the wedding table, half-shadowed and misspelled. Just me, hair messy from wind. Eyes sharp like always. There were lines near the corners, now small, honest ones. Not from smiling, from bracing. I turned away before I could start thinking too hard. Outside, the sun had dropped lower. The light had gone from yellow to something softer rose, maybe, or amber. The kind of light that made you feel like the world was forgiving you for something you hadn't named. I got back into the car. The compass sat snug in the center console, its needle already tilting gently to the west. I rested my hand on it just for a second. Not to guide it, just to let it know I was still here. The motel was one of those single-story strips along a road that used to matter. A neon sign flickered Vodka Y because the N had gone dark. There were weeds in the gravel lot, and the front desk had a bell that didn't work unless you hit it just right. I took room 4. No keycard, an actual key on a plastic fob the size of a stapler. The room smelled like stale air conditioning and carpet that had been shampooed too hard, but the sheets were clean. The TV didn't work. I didn't care. I sat at the small desk under the window and turned on the lamp. It buzzed faintly, casting everything in yellow. I took out the compass, set it down, and unfolded the stationery from my bag. Military stock. No letterhead, no lines. The kind they issue when they expect you to write something formal or final. I wasn't sure which this was. I clicked the pen, started writing. Lauren, you probably won't read this, or maybe you will, but months from now when the guilt wears thin and memory starts pressing on your chest like it used to. I brought you the compass because I wanted you to have something real, something with scars, something that never lied. I gave it to you hoping it would speak louder than I could, that maybe the weight of it would mean more than anything I could say. But I watched you laugh at it. I watched you show the world you didn't see it or me, and I told myself I didn't care. But I did. I always did. I know you think I'm hard, that I built myself into something steel and sharp just to punish the world. But the truth is, I only ever became this so you wouldn't have to. Someone had to be the wall. Someone had to be the fire escape. Someone had to be the person who didn't fall apart so you could keep pretending everything was fine. And maybe I held on to that too long. Maybe I forgot how to be anything else. I don't hate you, but I can't keep walking back into a version of family where silence feels like safety. If you want me, really want me, you'll have to find me without a map. But I'll leave the compass with you. It still points home, even if it's not mine anymore. I set the pen down, stared at the words, reread none of them. Then I folded the letter in half once, then again. Tight, clean creases. I didn't put it in an envelope. I pulled the motel ashtray closer, took out the lighter I carried, even though I didn't smoke. The flame curled along the edge of the paper like it had been waiting for permission. It didn't blaze, just crackled slowly, the ink going first. The weight of the words dissolving before the paper could catch up. I watched it to the end. Watched it curl and shrink and fall into itself until all that remained was ash and a corner that didn't burn all the way. Then I reached for the compass. It was warm. I held it in my palm like a stone. Closed the lid, let the metal cool against my skin. The motel window didn't open. I pressed my forehead to the glass. Outside, the wind bent the weeds low, but didn't break them. I thought about Lauren's face when she asked, "Why do you hate me?" And how quietly I'd said, "I don't." Sometimes the worst things we do to each other don't come from hate. They come from fear, from disappointment, from trying to matter in someone else's story without rewriting our own. I lay down, fully dressed, didn't bother setting an alarm. The compass stayed on the nightstand right beside my folded jacket and the ashtray full of what I wouldn't carry anymore. The air conditioner kicked on, cold air over old sheets. A hum that could have been mistaken for peace. I didn't sleep easily, but I didn't dream of Tennessee. The ceremony was small. Just the usual protocol standing at attention, a firm handshake, 2 photographs, and a lot of crisp uniforms that all looked the same from the back. They called my name Major Claire Halberg, and I stepped forward under the watch of people I'd bled beside, and some who still didn't know what I used to be before all this. The medal was just another metal shape, another weight on the chest. But the bars on my shoulder, they meant something. Not pride, exactly. Not accomplishment. Just proof that I hadn't been erased. Afterward, the colonel said, "Well earned, ma'am." Not sarcastic, not a joke. I nodded once firm and moved on. I wore the full dress uniform. Dark navy gold trimmed the jacket, tailored like armor. Every button had its place. Every crease pressed like a memory. People looked at me differently when I wore it. They always had. Like I made sense that way. Like I belonged to something bigger. And maybe I did. Maybe that was the closest I'd ever come to home. I didn't invite anyone to the ceremony. Not Lauren. Not our mother. Not anyone from before. I stood alone in the back afterward, sipping cold coffee and listening to 2 junior officers argue about deployment rosters. I could have corrected them. I didn't. In my quarters that night, I unpacked slowly, laid the uniform out flat on the bed, inspecting every thread like it was an old scar. On the dresser beside the citation folder sat the compass. Same place it had been for the past 2 weeks. Still pointing west, still unshaken. It didn't feel like a tool anymore. It felt like a relic. A bone passed down from hand to hand, never quite losing its shape no matter how many palms tried to make it theirs. I picked it up, turned it once in my hand. Pressed the lid closed with a soft click. I'd thought about mailing it back to Lauren. I even packed it once. Took it to the base post office. Filled out the form, but I stood in line for 20 minutes, and when it was my turn, I couldn't hand it over. Instead, I brought it home and set it on the dresser like it belonged. Maybe it does now. My desk light buzzed softly, casting that same old yellow hue across the metal. I lit a candle beside it, a habit I'd picked up recently. Small, steady flames. Not for scent or decoration, but for the discipline of attention. The wax pooled slowly. The wick barely moved. There was something about that stillness that made me feel grounded. No applause, no ceremony, just flame and metal and silence. I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my shoes one at a time. My feet ached not from the day, but from the miles behind me. Out the window, Colorado lay cold and sharp under the moon. Clean sky, clean air. Sometimes I think about the moment I left Tennessee, about the exact breath between shutting the car door and turning the key in the ignition. That pause where I could have stayed. But I didn't. I don't regret it. Promotion comes with more responsibility. More rooms to walk into where everyone falls quiet. More decisions that ripple down like gravity. But it also comes with solitude. And solitude doesn't feel like loneliness anymore. Not lately. A knock came on the door around 10 p.m., one of the younger cadets wide-eyed nervous. "Ma'am," she said, "just wanted to say congratulations. I read your file." I nodded. "That's classified," I said dry. She laughed nervous. "Right. Yes, ma'am. Just wanted to say thanks." "For what?" "For being who you are." I didn't say anything. She stood a second too long, then saluted and left. I closed the door behind her quietly. The kind of quiet that felt earned. Back in the room, I sat with the candle and the compass. No music, no screen. Just the hum of electricity and my own breath. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of all the things I no longer needed to explain. When I turned off the light, I didn't blow out the candle. I left it burning, let it stand watch while I slept. It came on a Wednesday morning. I was 2 hours into reports, half listening to a junior officer brief a room of people too tired to fake interest. My phone buzzed once, just once, and I ignored it the way I always did when I was in uniform. We were trained to keep our attention forward even when something from the past tapped us on the shoulder. But later, when I was back in my office, I checked it. It was a photo. No text, no context, just an image, the compass, set in a small glass case, resting on our father's old writing desk, the one with the dent in the leg where he kicked it during a fight no one ever talked about. The photo was clean, thoughtful, light coming through the window just right. Like she'd waited for the moment, like she'd wanted me to see it the way she had meant to see it that day, but hadn't. There were no words. No, I'm sorry. No, I finally understand. But she had chosen the desk. That meant something. That was the desk where Lauren used to sit cross-legged doing homework, where I once carved my name on the inside of the bottom drawer, small and slanted and scared, where Grandpa left us little sticky notes when he stayed over after Dad got sick. Eat the blueberries, feed the soul. I stared at the photo for a long time, not because I needed to, because I wanted to. My thumb hovered over it, waiting for something to rise in me. It didn't come with rage or sadness. It came with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt since the swing behind the barn. I didn't reply, didn't text back, didn't say anything. I deleted it, not because it meant nothing, because it had done what it came to do. I stood up, stretched. The ache in my shoulder reminded me I was still in a body, that the muscles remember more than we give them credit for. Outside, the light had shifted. Golden hour, they call it. That small, exact moment when everything seems more honest than usual. I walked outside. Colorado was bright that day. Clouds like breath stretched across the sky. The air sharp and open. An American flag flapped on the pole at the far end of the quad. Students passed underneath it, half aware, already thinking about whatever would come next. Some of them would go into combat. Some would spend their lives filing paperwork. Some would disappear into the machine of it all. I watched them, not with judgment, just with knowing. A breeze moved through my jacket, caught my collar. I didn't fix it. I kept walking, not fast, not slow. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. The compass stayed on my dresser. I hadn't touched it in days. I didn't need to anymore. I passed a row of hedges that hadn't bloomed yet. A path I'd taken hundreds of times back and forth, sunrise to sundown. The same concrete squares. The same cracks that always tripped new recruits. But that day, everything felt new. Or not new, just no longer asking to be forgotten. I thought about the doorway in Tennessee. The one I didn't step through after the funeral. The one that used to define whether I belonged or not. It's still there, probably. With a fresh coat of paint, maybe a different lock. But I don't need to open it. It's enough to know I could. And then quietly, without ceremony, I turned. And I walked toward the west.